I got married believing I'd found the person I'd grow old with. You know that feeling when everything in your head finally lines up with real life, when the future doesn't feel like a fog anymore because there's someone standing next to you, hand in hand. And you're both looking the same direction. That was me when I married Grace. We weren't kids. We met in our late 20s. Both steady, both tired of games. She was funny in a quiet way, not the kind of loud, performative humor that makes other people look at you, but a dry, quick wit that made you lean closer because you didn't want to miss it. She liked bookstores, rainy Sundays, trying new restaurants. She had this way of making ordinary things feel like they mattered. The first 2 years were solid. We built routines that felt like home, movie nights on Fridays, grocery runs on Saturday mornings, her head on my shoulder while we walked along the lakefront, talking about nothing important and everything important at the same time. We fought sometimes. Sure, but they were normal fights. Money, schedules, who forgot to pay the internet bill. We'd cool off, talk it out, laugh a little at ourselves. I never doubted we were on the same team. Then somewhere between year 3 and year 5, it started changing. Not like a single event you can point to. No dramatic betrayal. No obvious moment where you hear a crack and realize the thing you loved is breaking. It was more like mold behind the walls. Quiet. Slow. Almost polite. You don't notice until you can't ignore the smell anymore. People always ask what I did. Like there has to be some clean reason. I've asked myself 1,000 times, too. I'm not perfect. But I wasn't reckless. I didn't gamble away our money. I didn't cheat. I didn't disappear into some secret life. I worked hard. I carried my share. I tried to be thoughtful. That's the part that messes with your head, later trying to find the crime you apparently committed without ever being told what it was. Grace started spending more time with her friend Monica. Monica had gotten divorced a year before and moved through the world like she was constantly daring it to disappoint her again. At first, I didn't think much of it. Grace had always had friends, and I never believed in being the husband who polices a social life. If anything, I was glad she had someone to talk to while Monica was rebuilding her own life. But the tone shifted. Monica didn't just come over, she became a fixture. 3 times a week. Sometimes more. I'd come home and the two of them would be on the couch with glasses of wine, talking low and fast. The second I walked into the room, they'd pause. Not because they were surprised to see me, but like someone had just shut a door, I'd catch pieces here and there. Complaints about husbands, stories about men who didn't listen, men who didn't show up. It started general, like they were talking about the world at large. But then Grace began repeating the same phrases in arguments with me, like she downloaded a new personality update without warning. She started using terms I'd never heard her say before. Emotional labor, mental load, feeling unseen. I'm not saying those ideas are wrong. I know relationships take work. I know people can carry burdens without realizing it. But the way she used them felt less like an invitation to understand her and more like a list of charges being read out. Every conversation turned into me being cross-examined by a prosecutor who had already decided I was guilty. If I asked how her day was, she'd sigh like I'd interrupted something. If I didn't ask, I was accused of not caring. If I suggested we do something together on the weekend, she'd say I was suffocating her. If I let her make her own plans, she'd say I didn't prioritize her. I started to feel like the rules were shifting based on her mood. And no matter what I did, I was always stepping on a landmine. Her mom didn't help. Grace's mother had always been intense. But in the early years, it was manageable. She'd call, offer opinions, sometimes overstep. And Grace would roll her eyes and vent to me afterward. We'd joke about it. It was background noise. Then the calls started coming at dinner. Not once in a while, almost every night. She'd video call Grace while we were eating and stay on the screen for 40 minutes. Sometimes an hour. Grace would turn her body toward the phone and talk like I wasn't sitting 3 feet away. Our food would go cold. And when I'd say something gentle like, maybe call her back after we eat, Grace would snap. Why are you trying to control me? Control. That word became her favorite weapon. Her mom would make these subtle comments that weren't subtle at all. How her friend's daughter married a doctor. How her neighbor's son-in-law bought a boat. how someone's husband surprised them with a vacation. She'd say it with this syrupy smile, pretending it was just casual conversation. But it always landed in the same place. I wasn't measuring up. Grace would laugh along, not disagreeing, not defending me. Sometimes she'd glance at me afterward with a look that said, "See, like her mother, was a mirror, reflecting my failure." The bedroom went cold first. Not in a way I can describe with clean timelines. Just in stages. She'd go to bed later. She'd say she was tired. She'd say she had a headache. She'd say she had an early meeting tomorrow. She'd bring her phone into bed and scroll until the blue light washed her face blank. Then roll away without saying goodnight. At first, I assumed it was stress. We were both working a lot. I'm a project manager at a tech company in Chicago. I work long hours when launches get tight. Grace had her own job and her own rhythm. I didn't want to be the guy counting days and keeping score, so I gave her space. I tried to be patient. I tried to be understanding because that's what you do when you love someone and you think it's a rough patch. Not a new reality. Understanding turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. It wasn't just the distance at night. It was everything in between. I'd reach for her hand while we watched a show, and she'd shift away like she hadn't noticed. I'd hug her from behind in the kitchen, and she'd stiffen. Not always. Sometimes she'd tolerate it with this heavy exhale that made me feel like I was asking for too much by wanting to touch my own wife. You learn a lot about loneliness when you're sitting next to someone who used to feel like home. Around that time, I started noticing other things too. How she lit up when her phone buzzed but barely acknowledged me walking through the door. How she'd spend an hour getting ready to meet Monica for lunch. But for me, she'd stay in sweatpants all day without blinking. How our credit card had charges from stores I'd never even heard of. While she complained, we had no money for anything fun. None of it was proof of anything concrete. That's what makes it hard to talk about. It was more a pattern, a texture to daily life that was changing right under my hands. Work became my refuge. That sounds dramatic, but I mean it literally. I started looking forward to the office not because I loved spreadsheets or deadlines, but because at least their people treated me with basic respect. My coworkers asked about my day and listened to the answer. They didn't roll their eyes when I spoke. They didn't act like my presence was a tax they had to pay. At home, I felt like I was constantly walking on eggshells. Every sentence I said could be twisted into something else. Every calm comment could ignite an argument. And the worst part was that I still kept trying to fix it. To be softer, wiser, more patient. Like if I just found the right combination of words, the woman I married would come back. But something had already taken root. And I didn't see how deep it went yet. Not until that night in late April when I walked through our front door thinking I had good news for us, thinking maybe we'd finally have something to celebrate together, and realized I was the only one still fighting for us at all. Late April in Chicago is unpredictable. That week had been brutal at work deadlines. Pressure. The sort of strain that follows you home. I'm a project manager at a tech company. Used to holding things together. But that Thursday, something finally went right. I closed a major deal. Months in the making. And it came with a $5,000 bonus. Driving home around 7. I felt lighter than I had in a long time. I caught myself thinking maybe we could celebrate. Maybe good news could pull Grace back to me. She was on the couch when I walked in. Laptop open. Face lit by the screen. "Hey," I said. "You won't believe what happened today." She didn't look up. I told her anyway about the deal. The bonus. How relieved I was. She paused for a heartbeat and said, "That's nice." Eyes still glued to the laptop. No smile. No question. Nothing that said she was sharing my life with me. I stood there waiting, then swallowed the disappointment like I'd been doing for months. I took a shower. Changed. Tried to reset the night. When I came back out, she was in the same spot. Same posture. Like that laptop was the only thing that mattered. I sat beside her, leaving a careful gap because I'd learned closeness could set her off. The silence felt thick. I told myself to start small, to be normal. So I rested a hand on her leg, just a simple touch. She yanked away like I'd hurt her. "Don't touch me." The coldness of it knocked the air out of me. "Grace. What's wrong? I was just..." She finally turned, and the expression on her face wasn't annoyance or tiredness. It was disgust. I have self-respect, she said, sharp and measured. I'm not just going to let you touch me whenever you feel like it. I stared at her, stunned. Whenever I feel like it, I'm your husband. I was just trying to be close to you. She rolled her eyes like I was a child who didn't get it. She slammed the laptop shut, stood up, and said she was going to bed. You can sleep in the guest room tonight. I need space. Space. From me. I didn't follow her. I didn't argue. I didn't beg for a conversation she'd already decided I didn't deserve. I sat there on the couch staring at the dark TV until the room felt too quiet. I slept in the guest room. If you can call it sleep, mostly I lay awake replaying the last 2 years, Monica's constant visits. Their voices dropping when I walked in. The way every talk felt like a trial. Somewhere before dawn, a blunt thought landed. I've been trying to fix this alone. The next morning, Grace came into the kitchen looking refreshed. Like nothing had happened. She made herself coffee and didn't offer me any. She started chatting about meeting Monica for lunch. About needing money for new clothes. The way she spoke made it feel like we were roommates sharing an address. Not spouses sharing a life. Then she asked, "Can you transfer me $500 for shopping?" She said it like my answer was already expected. I looked at her and saw something I'd avoided naming: entitlement. The assumption that I existed to fund whatever she wanted while she gave me contempt in return. "No," I said. Her head snapped up. "What?" "No. I have self-respect too." The kitchen went silent except for the clock ticking. Her face flickered through confusion. Then shock. Then anger. And finally that cold mask she wore when she wanted to win. "Excuse me," she said quietly. "I'm not paying for a lifestyle for someone who treats me like garbage in my own home." I said, "Support goes both ways. Respect goes both ways." She let out a bitter laugh. "You're being ridiculous. 500 is nothing. You're supposed to support me." "And you're supposed to be my wife," I said, voice steady. Not someone who can't stand basic kindness. That was the match. She erupted, yelling that I was controlling, manipulating her with money. Just like every other man, she dragged Monica's worldview into the room, her mother's voice into her mouth. The words came fast, rehearsed, like she'd been waiting for me to slip so she could prove a point. I didn't raise my voice. I just stood there, realizing how long I'd mistaken endurance for love. When she finally ran out of breath, I said, "I'm going to the gym, then to Mark's for poker night." "You're not going anywhere," she said. "We need to talk now." "We'll talk tomorrow," I replied. I grabbed my keys and walked out while she was still shouting. Outside. The air felt different, like I'd stepped out of a locked room. At the gym, every rep felt like I was lifting years off my chest. Every mile on the treadmill felt like I was running from the meek version of myself who thought staying quiet would make things better. I promised myself that night would not be the last time I chose myself over her demands. By the time I drove to Mark's place, I wasn't just tired. I was clear. And I didn't know yet how far Grace would go to punish me for finally being clear. Poker night at Mark's place was supposed to be my reset button. Twice a month. Like clockwork. 5 of us from college met up. Played cards. Talked about work. Sports. Whatever. No drama. No walking on eggshells. Just a few hours where I could remember what it felt like to be myself. After the gym, I drove over there feeling lighter than I had in weeks. The workout had burned something off me: anger. Maybe. Or the last bits of guilt I'd been carrying like a habit. I kept replaying that morning in my head. The look on Grace's face when I said no. Not because I regretted it. Because it felt like the first real breath I'd taken in years. Mark lived about 20 minutes away. He had a proper poker setup in his dining room. The kind of thing he'd been building slowly since his first promotion. A big table. Good chairs. Chips in neat cases. He took pride in it. That night when I walked in, the guys were already there, Mike leaning back with a beer. Tom shuffling cards. Steve making fun of Mark's new professional dealer lamp. They looked up and smiled like they were genuinely glad to see me. "Dean's alive," Mike said. "Barely," I replied. And everyone laughed. It was easy. Normal. We played a few hands and talked about dumb things that didn't matter. And I could feel my shoulders lowering without me even thinking about it. I was actually winning a little, which didn't hurt. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't bracing for a fight. I wasn't translating my thoughts into the safest possible version before speaking. I was just there. Around 9:30, my phone buzzed. I glanced down. A text from Grace. "Where are you? When are you coming home? We need to talk." I stared at it for a second, then set my phone face down. We had talked for months. We had talked in circles. She didn't want a conversation. She wanted control. 10 minutes later, the phone buzzed again. "Come home now. This is not optional." I turned it on silent and went back to the game. I didn't feel guilty. I felt calm, like I was finally allowed to choose what I did with my own time. Then there was a heavy knock at the door. Not a normal knock, aggressive pounding that made all of us look up at once. Mark frowned and got up. We heard voices in the hallway before he even opened it. A woman's voice, sharp and loud. "Grace." My stomach dropped in a way I didn't expect. Not because I was scared, but because I knew instantly what this was. A scene, a point to prove, a boundary to break. Mark opened the door and she walked in like she owned the place. Monica followed right behind her. Both of them were dressed like they were headed downtown, not the kind of outfit you wear to crash someone else's night in the suburbs. Makeup done. Hair styled. Jackets hanging open like they were stepping onto a stage. Grace didn't say hello to anyone. She didn't ask if she could talk to me privately. She just scanned the room and locked onto me with an expression that was half fury, half triumph. "We need to talk," she announced. Not asked. Announced. Like everyone else in that room was furniture. The energy died instantly. My friends looked down at their cards. Nobody knew where to put their eyes. Mark stood by the door, unsure whether to step in or step back. I stayed seated, put my chips down carefully, looked up at her. "I'll be home later," I said evenly. "We can talk then." Her mouth tightened. "No. You're coming home now." "Grace," I said, keeping my voice low. "This isn't the time." She took a step closer, like she wanted to make the whole room part of her argument. "This is exactly the problem," she snapped. "You run away. You ignore me. You act like a child instead of facing what's happening in our marriage." The guys stayed silent. You could feel the discomfort like heat. I caught Tom's eyes for a second. He looked worried for me. Not angry at her. That mattered more than I expected. Grace went on, voice getting louder. She started listing every grievance she'd ever collected. How I never listened. How I was selfish. How I'd changed. How I was punishing her by leaving the house. She veered into our private life in a way that made my skin crawl. Not explicit, just personal. Deeply personal. The kind of stuff you don't air out in front of people who didn't sign up to be witnesses. Monica chimed in from behind her like a backup singer. "Men always do this," she said, shaking her head. "They avoid real conversations. They think disappearing fixes things." Grace nodded hard, feeding off it. I didn't interrupt, didn't shout, didn't defend myself point by point. I just listened while she dug the hole deeper. When she finally paused to breathe, I stood up slowly and pushed my chair back. I looked at Mark and said, "I'm out this hand." Then I turned to Grace. "I'll be home when I'm home," I said. The shock on her face was almost surreal, like I'd broken a rule she thought the universe enforced, a rule that said she could blow up my night, humiliate me in front of my friends, drag another person into it. And I was still supposed to fold and follow her. She took another step toward me, eyes wide, voice rising again. "You're not walking away from me." I walked past her anyway. Past Monica, too. I grabbed my jacket off the back of the chair and headed for the door without looking back. Behind me, her voice turned shrill, demanding, like she couldn't believe I was not stopping. "Dean, come back here." I heard Monica say something sharp, but I didn't catch it. I was already out the door, already in the hallway, already breathing again. I got in my car and drove. Not home. Not yet. I drove with no destination for almost 2 hours, circling streets I knew by heart, letting the city lights blur past. My hands were steady on the wheel, but my mind was on fire. She had tracked me down. She had shown up to someone else's house and tried to force me into submission in front of the people who cared about me. And she brought Monica like a witness, like a weapon. Like she needed a chorus to validate her version of reality. It wasn't a fight between spouses anymore. It was harassment. It was control, dressed up as concern. It was the clearest proof yet that whatever marriage we had left was already dead. When I finally got home around midnight, the apartment was dark. The bedroom door was shut. I went straight to the guest room and closed the door behind me. The next morning was a war. Grace was waiting in the kitchen like she'd been up all night. But she wasn't alone. Her mom was on speakerphone. I could hear her before I even entered the room. Already loaded with judgment. "Dean, what you did last night was disgraceful." Her mother said, "You embarrassed my daughter. A real husband doesn't storm out on his wife." Grace sat there with her arms crossed. Eyes hard, like she was watching a trial with her lawyer present. I made coffee without rushing. Sat down. Let them talk. They took turns. Grace said I'd humiliated her. Her mom said I was selfish. Grace said I was cold. Her mom said I was immature. They used the same word over and over, disrespectful, as if the only disrespect that existed was me refusing to obey. Finally, Grace leaned forward and said, "You owe me an apology." I looked at her. Then at the phone, "I don't owe anyone an apology for having friends." I said, "For going out for a few hours, for not being supervised." Her mom gasped, like I'd committed some crime. Grace's face flushed. "You're twisting this." "No," I said quietly. "I'm saying what's real." They started again. Louder this time. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue in circles. I finished my coffee, stood up, and went to get ready for work while they were still listing everything wrong with me. As I walked out the door, their voices followed me down the hall, and I knew this wasn't going to stop, not because they wanted to fix anything, because they wanted me back in my place. But something in me had moved. And I couldn't go back. Not after the line she crossed. Not after seeing how far she was willing to go to pretend I wasn't allowed to have one. After poker night, our apartment stopped feeling like home and started feeling like a courtroom. Grace didn't apologize for crashing Mark's place. She acted like the humiliation was my fault for making her chase me. Her mom called every night, already furious. And Monica reappeared on our couch 3 nights a week, nodding along like backup. The next weeks ran on a cruel routine. I'd come home and try to read the air. Sometimes Grace was silent and icy, moving past me without eye contact. Other times she turned on a bright, fake sweetness that felt like bait. Whatever version showed up, the message was the same. I was the problem. Dinner wasn't ours anymore. Her mom would video call and Grace would talk for 40 minutes while our food went cold. If I suggested calling back later, Grace said I was controlling. That word was their hammer. Monica fed it with talk about patterns and red flags, like she'd memorized a manual. I stopped arguing. They weren't listening, so I moved my clothes to the guest room and started sleeping there every night. Grace watched me carry the basket down the hall like she couldn't believe I had a spine. I didn't explain. The click of that door said enough. Home became a hallway I walked through. I stayed later at work because I could breathe there. One night I walked in around 9 and found Monica already there. 2 wine glasses on the table. Grace didn't look up. "We're talking," she said. "About what? About why you've been acting like this," she said, gesturing at Monica. "I'm not doing this with your friend here." Monica lifted her eyebrows. "See, avoidant." Grace smirked like that was proof. I didn't fight. I went into the guest room and shut the door. That week, my brother Jake called. He'd been asking me to visit his cabin in Wisconsin. I dodged it because Grace always blocked the trip. When Jake asked if I was okay, I told him the truth. My marriage is falling apart. He paused, then said, "Come up here if you need to breathe. The offer's open." I thanked him, but told him I had things to handle first. Saying it out loud felt solid. Decision. Then came the barbecue at Grace's sister's place. Grace insisted we go. Her whole family was there, and Monica was glued to her side. Grace performed the role of frustrated wife all afternoon. She'd smile in front of others, then toss comments loud enough to travel, I was never home. I'd changed. She didn't know what happened to me. Her mom backed her up with pointed questions about our future. Monica nodded like she was grading a paper. I stood at the grill flipping burgers while they talked about me like I wasn't there. Tom, my brother-in-law, pulled me aside near the gate. "You okay?" he asked quietly. "I'm done." I told him. "It's over. I'm just figuring out how to end it." He looked sad, not shocked. "I get it," he said. Around 5. Grace announced she had plans with Monica downtown for a concert. She didn't ask if I wanted to come. She just stated it. Like I was a roommate. "Go ahead," I said. "I'll help clean up." She left laughing with Monica. I did dishes with Tom and his wife. Then said goodbye. But I didn't drive home. I drove to a coffee shop, opened my laptop, and typed divorce attorney Chicago. I read reviews for hours and made a list of 5 lawyers. The next morning I called the top one, Patricia Chun, 20 years in family law. Straightforward. Respected. No nonsense. We booked a consultation for the next week. I didn't tell Grace. I started gathering documents at night bank statements. Credit cards. Lease papers, copying what I needed while she was out. Patricia asked about everything, how long we'd been married. Money. Debts. Kids. No kids. Under 10 years, 2 cars. A joint account. My 401k. Her student loans I'd helped pay. She explained Illinois law likely a 50-50 split. No long-term support. She had to ask about counseling. I told her the relationship was dead. She gave me a checklist and a clear path. That weekend I looked at apartments. I told Grace I was checking out a new gym. She barely noticed. I toured 1 bedrooms I could afford alone and found a modest place with good light for $900 a month. I applied Monday. Got approved by Thursday. Signed Friday. Holding those keys felt like breathing after being underwater. Grace was busy planning a girls' trip with Monica. So I moved quietly. A carload of clothes and books while she was at work. Another load of kitchen things. My laptop. My documents. Piece by piece, I erased my footprint from our shared space. On a Tuesday morning in mid-June, while I was at work, a process server delivered the divorce papers to Grace. I chose that on purpose. I didn't want a scene in the apartment. My phone blew up around 10. 17 missed calls before I answered. Her voice was half screaming, half crying. "Is this a joke?" "No," I said. "I've moved my essentials. Our lawyers will handle the rest." There was a long, stunned silence, and I knew the quiet part of my exit was over. After the papers were served, Grace turned into someone I barely recognized again, only this time, the mask dropped completely. The first 3 days were chaos. She bounced through denial like it was a lifeboat. She told anyone who would listen that I was going through something, that I'd calm down and come home once I got it out of my system. Then denial curdled into rage. My phone lit up at midnight. 2 in the morning? 4 in the morning texts that swung from insults to threats to a kind of wounded disbelief. Her mom left voicemails saying I'd regret this, that she'd make sure everyone knew what kind of man I was. Monica posted vage. Poisonous quotes online about strong women escaping toxic relationships. I blocked all of them. Not to be petty. To protect the last thread of quiet I had. Then came bargaining. Grace showed up at my office 3 times in 1 week. The first time I didn't even know until security called me down. She was in the lobby crying, saying we needed to talk, promising she'd change, promising counseling, promising anything only if I would come back. I told her calmly it was over and she needed to leave. She didn't. Security walked her out. The second time, same thing. The third time, security didn't even call me. They just escorted her out because they already knew the pattern. She tried recruiting my friends next. She called Mark, asking him to talk sense into me. Mark told her he supported my decision and hung up. She called my brother Jake. Somehow, she found his number. Jake didn't sugarcoat it. He told her he'd watched her tear me down for 2 years and I should have left sooner. That ended that plan. None of it worked, because everyone close to me had seen who I'd become inside. That marriage tired. Careful. Smaller every month. and they'd seen what she'd become around me: colder, louder, crueler, especially when she had an audience. 6 weeks after I served the papers, I went up to Jake's cabin in northern Wisconsin for a long weekend. Jake couldn't make it that time work conflict, so I had the place to myself. It was quiet in a way my life hadn't been in years. A small lake. Not neighbors close by. Nothing but trees, water, and air that didn't feel heavy. Saturday evening around 7, I was sitting on the dock with a beer watching the sunset when I heard a car pull up. At first I thought maybe Jake had surprised me. Then I heard Grace yelling my name. I stood up, and there she was, stumbling down the path toward the water. She was clearly drunk. Not tipsy, not had a drink or two, fully drunk, unsteady, loud, and dressed like she'd gotten ready for a night out instead of a 4-hour drive into the middle of nowhere. She was crying and shouting at once, saying I couldn't throw away 5 years, that I was cruel, that she loved me, that we needed to talk. I didn't move toward her. I told her from where I stood that she shouldn't have driven like this, that she needed to leave, that this wasn't okay. She kept coming anyway, not looking where she stepped, her heels catching on roots and boards. I saw it happen before it happened. Her foot snagged on a loose plank. She windmilled her arms, grabbed at air, and went sideways into the lake. The splash was huge. She screamed, and then the water swallowed it. I jumped in immediately, not because I felt pulled back into the marriage, but because I wasn't about to let someone drown. I grabbed her arm and dragged her to the shallow edge. She was coughing, shivering, furious and embarrassed all at once. Her phone was ruined. Her makeup ran down her face in dark streaks. She sat there shaking, repeating the same question: why didn't I love her anymore? I got her a towel and some of Jake's old clothes and told her to change. Then I called a local cab company, no ride apps out there, and waited at a distance while she tried to talk. She said Monica had been wrong. Her mom had been wrong. She said she could see it now. I told her the truth. This is why we're done. You can't respect boundaries. You can't show up in my life and demand a place in it. Not like this. The cab came 45 minutes later. I paid the driver to take her to the nearest hotel and make sure she got inside safely. Monday morning, my lawyer called. Someone near the lake had seen the whole thing: her arrival, the yelling, the fall, the way she'd been harassing me. Patricia said it mattered. It showed instability and a clear pattern. The divorce moved quickly after that. Grace didn't have grounds to fight, and I didn't have anything left to argue. We met once for mediation in late September. We split things 50-50, like Illinois law requires. I kept my car and my $401k. She kept hers. We closed joint accounts, divided furniture, signed what we had to sign. The judge finalized everything in early November. 7 months after the night, she told me not to touch her. It was done. Last I heard, Grace was living with Monica, working an entry-level job at a bank, posting quotes online about independence and strength. Her mom still sends occasional emails with subject lines like, "You'll regret this." I delete them without opening. I'm in my own one-bedroom now. Clean. Quiet. This scent light. A view of the city. Poker nights are back twice a month. I'm at the gym 5 days a week. My friends say I look younger, like someone pulled a weight off my shoulders. They're right. I spent 5 years trying to make someone happy who decided that making me small was more satisfying than being happy herself. In the end, she wanted respect. She got it. I respected myself enough to walk away. And peace, I learned, isn't something you beg for from the wrong person. It's something you build the moment you stop accepting less than you deserve. Thank you for listening to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Also, leave a comment below to share your thoughts on what happened. Take care.